Good morning, y'all, and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining us. So today our video is all about all the things that went wrong with this guy behind me in our first 18 months of living full-time on the road. Now Alicia and the baby won't be joining us in this video, but they thank you for all the well wishes. Don't worry, they're returning soon to the YouTube production, but today you get just me. So I had a list going of all the things that we broke, and I was curious to keep track of it because I wanted to know how much was it costing me to live full-time on the road on this thing for repairs, maintenance costs, stuff like that. Well, you guys have been requesting a video about what it's like to live in a camper full-time. So I'm gonna start today by showing you all the things that we've had to fix, repair, that's broken, damaged, totally destroyed on this camper in our first 18 months. And I'm gonna do it in chronological order because that's what makes sense for our travel, and it'll make more sense to you guys when I start telling the story. Anyway, let's get started. So when we got this camper, we were looking at new and used, and the cost of new was so great that we started exploring the used options. Well, turns out we got lucky on this one because this one wasn't actually for sale. But once we started talking to the owner, it became apparent that he was willing to sell it. They were actually trying to get out of the RV world. Funny story is, they're actually back in the RV world now, and we stay in touch with them. But we used the savings of the cost between new and used, and we put it aside in preparation for all the things you see in this video. Because we have been researching online, and we saw all the things and all the problems people were having in an RV, let alone all the things that get accelerated whenever you live in it full time. So we've used some of that savings to make these repairs, but in the long run, we're still ahead cost-wise on our used model versus what we would have paid for a new one. So anyway, just keep that in mind. If you decide to go full-time RVing, there will be things that are gonna go wrong. Doesn't matter how good you take care of it, things will break on you. The very first problem we ever had with this camper was right here. So our camper came without the washer and dryer. We decided to go to a local dealer, purchase these two items, and have them install it. Mostly because I was afraid of drilling a hole in my beautiful paint outside, and I wanted them to be responsible for it. Turns out, the only time my camper has been to a dealership, it came back worse than when I dropped it off. These were purchased, and I dropped it off one morning to have these installed. And granted, this is literally like 3 days before we're about to leave on our very first adventure RVing. Like we have no home, we're done. We're leaving, we're going on the road, not coming back. I drop it off, they install these, they tell me to come pick it up. I go pick it up, I drive back home, I hook the water to it, and I'm excited to show Alicia the new washing machine and dryer. Before I get into the camper, there is water coming out the ground right here. It's so bad it's leaking outside, out the kingpin or the pin box area, like it's flooding this room. And that's just from me turning the water on. I didn't even get around the door to the camper yet. Alicia comes out and goes, there's water everywhere. So we get the water turned off, and I don't know if you can see, but the connections are right there. So I can see that they're leaking, and I can't reach them because my arm doesn't fit, right? I make some phone calls. They do offer to fix it, but I have to bring it back the next day. So I go back the next day, and we have to pull all this out. Well, first part of the story is they wanted me to leave. They didn't want me to see the work. And I was in a bad mood because we were getting ready to leave, and this was a big deal. And this actually cost a lot of money. Between these two and the labor they charged me, it was ridiculous. I could have bought a third unit for the labor. We take all this out, they tighten up the hoses. We also find the way they routed the dryer vent was already destroyed after one time down the road, so we had to redo all that. Then I make them do a test with me. So this is where they got me a second time. They started a spin cycle on the washing machine. Well, they let it run for like 5 or 6 minutes, showed me there was no leaks, and then they canceled the spin cycle. We're all happy. We pack up and we hit the road. So we leave Texas and we head to Florida. We get to Florida, the first day we try to do laundry, there's a whole bunch of error signs right there. So I call them back up and say, hey, it's not working. It won't do a complete cycle. After like 3 or 4 minutes, it faults out. They tell me it's not their problem, that once it's installed and the labor's paid for, I have to go through Splendid to get anything resolved. Well, I called them up. The man is really awesome. They're super awesome. The dealership should do more work in promoting this stuff, because the dealership was basically done with me once they had my money. This guy right here, he walked me through some troubleshooting and said, all right, cool, the board's bad. He asked me where I was. He sent a technician with the board. The technician came to our campground in Florida. I helped him pull both these units out now. So now these units have been out 3 times before they've ever worked successfully. We changed the board on that, and we reinstalled everything. He cleaned everything up on the back side that you can't see, and he told me how bad of a job the dealership did at installing all this. And then he stayed there and ran 2 full cycles, a quick cycle and a long cycle, and made sure everything worked before leaving. All right, so we just got to Florida, and the next thing on our list that broke was the fridge vegetable drawers. So anyway, they got these little tabs right here, these little things, so when you pull it out, it opens the door. Well, that broke, and I'm like most of you, if something breaks, I'm gonna fix it, because if you let one thing go, eventually 2 things are broken, and 3 things are broken, then a lot of things in your camper are broken. So I tried to order just this piece. Well, they only sell you the whole entire top shelf. So when it arrived, I replaced the entire top shelf with all these little brackets and stuff. And then I took the old shelf and I took it apart and saved all the good parts for spares. And I think we actually gave the glass part to one of our neighbors who had a crack in it. So we're on the roof, and the next problem we had is right there. So this is our main slide topper. And you can see it's holding water, and that's part of the reason why the next problem happened. You can see that the refrigerator slide topper does not hold water, and the bedroom slide topper does not hold water, but this one does. So I wake up one morning and I walk outside, and this whole piece right here is like separated, laying on top. So it pulled all this right here that the slide topper is hooked to out of the side of the camper. I ended up having to go to town and get some screws and get some glue, and I had to pull that entire trim piece off, screw it all back in all the way down the slide topper, and then we have to watch this all the time. So anytime after a good rain, I have to come out here and I have to use my broom handle, and I stand on the stairs and I pick up and drain the water off. And you can see the slide topper right here is already starting to tear because of all the weight it has. Whenever it's holding water, it literally holds gallons, and it puts a strain on that piece right there and right here. So after we fixed the slide topper, the very next day I came out, that light, and this light didn't work. Well, it's just because the bulbs were bad, but we had never used those, and we used them one time the night before, and the next morning they no longer work. So we went ahead and replaced those with LEDs, and they've been running now for 18 months and haven't had an issue. Don't mind this. You've already seen this video. It came out right before this one, maybe 2 before this one, I'm not sure yet. This is my science experiment on toilet paper. But our next thing in Florida was this window right here. So we have the dual pane windows, and I don't know if you can see that. We wake up and all of a sudden this one's fogged up. So obviously that means that our seal is bad. Now we haven't got that fixed yet because we can't get anybody to give us a good number on what it's going to cost to fix it. And if you try to call in a dealer or Green Design, it's like pulling teeth. So we decided that we'll fix it whenever we get around to it, or the opportunity shows itself. For right now, it's still a window. It's just got some fog in it because the seal between the 2 panes is broken. So all the things I just talked about happened in our first week of full-time RV living. And me and Alicia both thought, what have we gotten ourselves into? Because this thing is literally falling apart every single day. Well, for the rest of the trip, we were pretty successful. Now on our way home, we almost had a big deal. So we were at a truck stop. This jack right here almost hit the ground, and that's because the stock mounting point had them way down here when they were fully retracted. They were like below the center line of the axles. So when we got to our next spot, I went ahead and raised all my jacks. Well, this one and the middle ones. The front ones are already all the way up. But this one and the middle one, I raised them almost 3 inches. So now when they're fully retracted, they're right here at this level, which puts them about center line of the axles. But that day was almost a big deal because it came close to ripping this back jack off and that back jack off because of like the curb and the fuel island. It dropped off and the camper went down. That could have been a big deal that was avoided. On our next move, we started to notice that when the slide was in right here, it was starting to rub right there. Well, I'm gonna go outside and show you what else it was doing on the outside of the camper. So this is our main slide, and so I just showed you what it was doing on the inside. It was hitting the fireplace. Well, out here on the outside, whenever this slide would go in, it was closer on this side than on that side. So whenever it got fully, I guess, retracted, this part right here was almost being ripped off the camper. And then when you come over here to this side, whenever this was all the way in, it had a huge gap, like it wasn't going far enough in. So I watched a YouTube video and I made my own adjustments. And I thought I did pretty good because I had it looking pretty square and everything was moving nice and fine and perfect, and then I was like, good to go. Well, you'll find out in a few more problems that I created a different problem and didn't even know it. So now we're at Big Bend National Park. The slide was also done at Big Bend National Park, but the next problem was the sink. So we were thawing some meat out one day and we had some water in the sink, and Alicia goes, there's no more water in the sink, and there's water all over the floor. So I start investigating, and this seal right here around the drain was leaking right there. So when I put water in there, it would leak out around the drain and fill the whole bottom of the cabinet up and come out down here. So tripped to town, got some plumber's putty, resealed both the drains, and checked all the connections down there to make sure we wouldn't have any more problems. So let's talk about the worst thing that we've had to fix on this camper, and that is our roof. So we were in Arizona and we stopped at a rest area, and I was looking around and everything looked funny. So like, you can't see it, but like my shadow of the camper looked funny. When I was coming back from the bathroom, I just looked up there and my roof looked funny. Well, it was because it was funny. So when I walked up here, this whole front section from the front cap to this AC unit was aired up with air. Like it was like a dome, right? So I didn't have anything to do to fix it. It wasn't coming all the way off, it was just holding air. So I took about 200 to 300 foot of Eternabond tape, pulled it back tight against the front cap, and laid all kinds of layers of Eternabond tape across the front. We decided to start doing researching and found out that once it starts coming off, it's pretty much done. And they were right, because before we got it fixed, this part right here, it started getting close to the edge of the AC and it was actually starting to rip a hole. But our choices were either let the dealership or the insurance install a brand new roof, but it would be the exact same vinyl stuff, or explore alternatives. Well, there's two companies out there. You have Flex Armor and RV Armor. They both do the same thing. They have their own proprietary roof that they install and offer a lifetime warranty. Flex Armor though requires you to go to their facility, and since we're full-time and we didn't want to give our camper up, that's also why we didn't go to the dealership too, because they wanted 6 weeks with our camper. RV Armor comes to you wherever you are, and they will put a new roof on. Now ours costs a little more because we had them take the entire existing vinyl roof off. So we actually had to remove all this stuff up here, and I'll show you some clips. Take off all the old vinyl and then put their new proprietary roof down. Now I can say this cost us about $7,500, but it's the best investment we've ever had, because now I no longer have to worry about this roof. It has a lifetime warranty, and if there's ever a problem, I just give them a call and they'll send a tech out to wherever I am in the United States and they will fix it. Now I still come up here and inspect it every move, but I no longer have to carry a bunch of Dicor around or reseal this roof. I just clean it and inspect it, and that's it. So after we dealt with the roof problem, well, we didn't really deal with it in Arizona, we just managed it. The next thing that happened was the air admittance valve for this sink right here stopped working. And we knew that because every time we ran water, it would smell horrible in this room. And to test it, we just filled this sink and this sink full of water, and then I would pull the plug, you would see air bubbles coming up. So instead of venting the air into the tank through the air admittance valve, it was actually having to vent the tank air through the drain, causing the smell to come in here. So on a trip to my favorite store, Lowe's, we got a new one. Well, I should have got more than one, because the very next day our master bath sink air admittance valve started acting up. So we replaced that one, and not to be outdone again, the very next day after that, the sink in our guest bathroom started acting up. So now I travel with 3 spares at all times, because that smell right there will drive you out of this camper. People don't know this, but that gray tank smells worse than black tank sometimes, I think. So we left South Arizona and we traveled to North Arizona. When we got there, this started happening. So when we arrived there, this whole trim piece was actually laying on top of the slide. Almost caused a big deal, but I caught it before it went through the rubber. But it was something I didn't even know I was supposed to be looking out for, that these trim pieces can fall off. So another trip to Lowe's, we got some Gorilla Glue and we got better nails, and we went ahead and glued it up there, nailed it back in, put tape on it for 24 hours and let it dry. We left Arizona and we're heading to Utah, and we got to our next spot, and this front cap and bottom cap section, whatever you call this piece, was separating all the way around. There was like a 3-inch gap right here, and all the screws were pulled out, this side and that side. And so I got to researching it, and a lot of people say that that's because wind is going up in here. Well, you saw that my roof problem was also airing up, and people say that the wind can come in right here, go up to the roof. Well, since I taped down the roof, the wind had to go somewhere, so apparently it was blowing this apart. So back to Lowe's, got more hardware and fasteners and sealant and awesome glue, and put it back together and sealed it off. And now that has not been a problem ever since either, I will say. So right here, this whole thing, there was like 1 screw, 2 screw, 3 screw. So now there's a screw like every 3 or 4 inches, and it's holding up just fine. So we're still in Utah, and the next thing that happened on our move was this back screen defender broke. So we were traveling, we got to our next spot, we opened the door, and all this stuff fell out. All the little tabs were broken off. We managed to make it work, but we don't know why it broke, because it was brand new and we just installed it. But now it's broken and damaged, and they have really small plastic tabs on the bottom to keep it in place. We ended up having to replace that. Not a big deal because it's an option, but it happened. We are still in Utah, and the next thing that went bad, so your recliners have these pull handles right here that you pull. Oh, perfect timing. So anyway, that happened. I was actually trying to open the recliner to show you it worked. So add it to the list. It's now broken twice. But the good thing is when you order them from Amazon, it comes in a pack of 2. It takes longer to get the couch apart than it does to replace this piece right here. Add this to the list. It's now broken twice. Once in Utah and once today in Texas. So we leave Utah and we head to Colorado. And guess what? I didn't learn my lesson the first time, so I only glued that one back up. Well, that one fell off. I decided I was gonna fix all of them. So I went back to town, got some more glue and tape, and I fixed that one. I also took this one down and fixed it, and I took that one up there down and fixed it. And so far, they've all stayed up. This is early in our trip, probably like another year. They haven't fallen down since, but I should have known if that one fell down, these weren't far behind it, because it's RV land. Everything works in pairs. Not only did the ceiling trims fall off, this whole side of the dresser fell off. Well, that was easy to fix. I just put the same stuff. I got glue, and I got better fasteners. They had those really small nails in them, so that's been pretty good ever since. But when we walked in here and the whole thing was exposed, Alicia was like, what is going on with this camper? The further we get from Texas, the more things are falling apart. Our next problem was our second biggest problem we've had with this camper. Didn't really cost a lot, but it could have cost a whole lot. So we're on our second move in Colorado, and we enter an RV park. The first one that has a significant decline into the park, and we hear a loud noise, and that loud noise was that right there. You can barely see it, but we have a good scratch right there. Well, that was the corner of our truck right here hitting that as we turned in and went down and turned. So we didn't know that we had a problem until we heard that noise, and we knew it was close, but we'd done traveled like 2,500 miles, never had a problem. We just assumed, okay, the big camper, big truck, it's just things you gotta watch out for. But we're not sure if it had been happening before we noticed it or not. But once we did notice it, it seemed like every move for like the next 10 or 12 moves were a big deal. Like, we started paying attention to this, and we saw that almost every time we entered and left an RV park, we would touch either the side, the tailgate, or that side. So we start researching it, and it has to do with the type of frame that these campers are built on. So specifically, if it's a 20,000 pound and up drop frame chassis that has the Lippert Rota-flex stock pin box. We had that, and when you pair it with a 2017 or newer Ford, Chevrolet, or Dodge, because in those years they raised the bed rails by 2 inches. So previous models like the 2016 and below, we'd have had 7.5 inches, no problem, clear as day. But with all those factors in combination with each other, it becomes a problem. Now, this guy right here, this is our Gen Y pin box. This is what we use to solve our problem. And if you're interested in that, we made a whole video about it. I'll link it down below, you can go check it out. But long story short, I ran into a guy that looked like he should be having the same problem as me, and he said he didn't, but he had that installed. Well, he had one of those full house ones, which I think is a DRV model, I'm not sure. But he told me that when he picked his up, they were changing that out at the factory. And they said it's because they're getting reports that these big campers right here are hitting the newer truck bed rails. I was interested in this, so I called Gen Y, and he goes, yes, you must drive a Momentum. And I was like, how did you know? He goes, because most Momentum owners that have, there's only 3 models that have this drop frame chassis. If they have the Lippert the stock Lippert Rota-flex pin box, it's gonna hit on a new truck. And if it hasn't hit, it will. That was our next big thing, and we made a video about it. You guys go check it out if you're interested. But that could have cost a whole lot more than that pin box. So that pin box, it was a fair price, but the cost of fixing this bed or whatever damage we might have done up here we're doing well more than the cost of a new pin box. So we leave Colorado and we head to Wyoming, and the next thing I notice is that whole light, well, the lens is gone, but the whole light fixture is hanging off, screws pulled out of the side of the wall, but there's no other damage on the side of the camper. Like, there's no way I hit that without hitting the awning or that light or this awning and slide topper. That's just hanging by wires and the screws are dangling, and I have no idea if wind got in there and popped it out or something, but the lens came out, which may have let wind get in there and pop the rest of the housing out. So we had to order that up and repair that. So our next problem, we come back to the refrigerator, and we had the dreaded door not closing alarm. When the door doesn't close, it starts flashing an alarm right here, and it will not turn off till the door closes properly. Well, we got to learn that if you just push on whichever door you push on, it makes the alarm go off. That's the door that's causing the problem, because when the door's closed, it has to push up on this guy right here to clear that alarm. After some research, we found that a lot of people are taking these doors off the hinges and putting a washer underneath the bottom of the hinge, and it lifts the door up, which makes a positive contact with that door switch. So we did that one, and we thought we were good because the door alarm went away. Told you everything in RV world happens in pairs. Like a month and a half later, this one started doing it, and we knew that because the alarm would go off, we push on this door, it would go away. So we had to go ahead and take this door off the hinge and install the washer as well. We leave Wyoming and we go to Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, and we're back in Texas before we have our next problem. We were starting to think, we finally ironed out all the things that are gonna go wrong, and now it's gonna be smooth sailing. Well, when we got to Texas, this little piece right here was blown out, like the little translucent, like the whatever you call this thing, it wasn't there anymore. It was down here in the bottom of the shower. So I took all this puff out, re-glued it back down, and our next move, it was out again. And I was like, man, why does that keep coming unglued? I thought maybe it's humidity problem. Well, that night it rained and I hear water, and I come in here and water is pouring through all this, through the roof, filling this bathtub up. So I'm going to show you all the footage of that. But I ended up going up there and found out why this was coming out. It's because one of the screws had come undone and it allowed a flap to open when you're traveling, and air was coming in there, blowing this out. Well, when you weren't traveling and it started raining, everything on the roof when it rained drained right into this skylight area and filled this entire thing up. And we actually filmed this part, so I'll show you that clip. The next thing that was a problem is no longer a problem. You can see right here, I've done fixed it. So every move, there used to be this trim piece that went around this fireplace. And every time we'd move, it would start to fall off, and I'd have to get stuff out and put it back up. It didn't matter what I did to it, it would always come back off. And I didn't do anything crazy because I knew we'd already talked about making changes here, so I didn't want to glue it back up or use big fasteners because I didn't want to have to work over that mess whenever I decided to do this. All right, so the next thing was not a huge deal, but it looked like a huge deal when we discovered it. So we were driving down the road and we stopped for a break, and I noticed that I could see insulation outside my camper. Well, this whole bottom piece right here in the front section of the camper was hanging down, insulation, wires, all that stuff was showing, like the outside of the camper was trying to become the outside of the camper. But we made a temporary repair on the side of the road, and then we ended up making a permanent solution by getting these angle iron pieces and holding the chloroplast up, and it's held up for, I don't know, 9 or 10 months now with no more issues. So we're back out here at the slide. Remember earlier when I said I made my own slide adjustment and I thought it was good, and then it created a problem that showed up later? Well, now it's later. So we're in Oklahoma and we get to our first spot, and I notice that the slide ski right here on this edge is cracked and damaged. So I get flex tape and I cover it up just to keep water out, and I start researching what it takes to fix it. Well, you need to replace this slide ski. But we were getting ready to head home for the holidays in like another month or two, and I said I'll just fix it then. And every time I moved, I would put more flex tape on it, because every time it goes in once, it comes back out, destroys all the flex tape, and everything looks ugly. And I just want to keep water from getting inside the slide until I can get home and fix it. Well, by the time we got to Memphis, Tennessee, this was so bad that it was beyond not fixing it that day. So we called a mobile RV technician, and he came out and he fixed the slide ski for me, and I'll put those on the screen right now because we made a video about that. He also showed me how I messed up when I was adjusting my slide, so I did it out of order. He said you were almost right, but all you did was move a problem from this side to that side, and he showed me how to do it the right way. So our next problem, you may not be able to see it, but our awning lights started going out. It started with one here, one here, one here. Now you can see we have big groups of them burning out. Now, once I noticed it, it seemed like every time I unroll this awning, more of them will burn out. That's actually an easy fix. I just haven't got around to doing it, but you order an LED strip and you cut it to the right length, you stuff it back in that channel and just wire it in. But we haven't done that yet because we're waiting to see if the other two awnings start burning out. They haven't yet, but I know they work in pairs, so it's only a matter of time. So our next problem really wasn't a problem, but it was a situation that needed to be addressed in case it became an issue. And that was, we got somewhere and this cable right here was broken. And apparently during our travels, we had turned sharp and the cable got hung up in something in the bed. And instead of pulling the breakaway switch, it actually pulled the cable out of the crimp. So had we had a situation where we needed this to work, it would have not worked. It would have pulled the crimp apart instead of pulling the plug right here and setting the brakes on the camper. So we went ahead and made a new one and we crimped it properly. We also lengthened it so we can go anywhere in the bed of the truck and we don't have to worry about it accidentally getting pulled and setting the brakes on us. I was up on the roof and I was checking things out and I noticed my red lights up there were cracked. Well, that one was cracked and about to fall off, but I have 4 more up there for a total of 5, and when I looked at them, they were all cracking the same way. So I went ahead and ordered new lenses up and replaced them, and the only thing I can think of is those are always in the direct sunlight because it's the same lenses right here on the side of the camper and the front of the camper, and they're not cracked at all. But those look like they had serious UV damage and just exposure to the sun at all times. Our first trip out came to an end. We had no more damage to the camper, but it was time to take care of some of the upgrades we do to the truck that we noticed our first year out needed to be improved upon. So our first thing was we had 5,000 pound airbags installed on this truck, and we noticed that it was taking 100% of the capacity of the airbag, so 100 psi, which is max pressure, to support the weight of this camper. So we decided to change the airbags out from the 5,000 pound bags to the 7,500 pound bags. So those have been great. We were actually now running about 65 psi to do the same work that the 5,000 pound bags did at 100 psi. And the reason I changed it out is because I know if you run a component to max capacity all the time, it's gonna fail sooner than later. Next up on the list, we needed to change the shocks out in this truck. The stock shocks just weren't doing it for us. And we decided to go with the Bilstein 5100. So we changed them on the front and the rear. And I can say, I don't know if it's the airbags that make this truck ride better or those shocks, or a combination. But both those combined, this truck rides better than the day we bought it. All right, so the next thing that we took care of on this truck is the death wobble. We may have had it once, but we went ahead while we were in town, we had it checked out, all the linkage under the front and the steering components checked out. They were all good. So we installed the Icon dual shock steering stabilizer kit. And I will say that does make the steering reaction of the truck far better than it was. The last thing that we did to the truck while we were in town is our first year out, we put 44,000 miles on our tires. And because we were having such a hard time getting people to rotate them properly, the backs were still in good condition, but the fronts were beyond their usable life. So we went ahead and got brand new tires on the truck before we hit the road again. Now we went to stock Michelins because we loved how they acted the first time and how they handled the camper and how smooth and quiet they were on the highway at speed. So we left Texas after the holidays and we're back on the road, and it was actually smooth sailing for quite a while until we got the poo pyramid. We actually made a video about that. It was kind of funny how we dealt with it, but it wasn't because of the way we were using the toilet. It was because of some other reasons, some maintenance issues, not really maintenance issues, maintenance procedures that I decided to neglect for a few moves, and it cost me. We've since resolved it because we went back to flushing and dumping our tanks every single move instead of skipping a few moves, because it does matter. We never had a problem before. I skipped a few maintenance days, we had a problem. We haven't skipped since, and it's smooth sailing. No more poo pyramid problems. But that one almost became a big deal. I was actually stressed because I was like, worst case scenario, I was like, I'm about to have to fix something that involves my own poo, and I'm gonna have to be all up in it. So after the poo pyramid issue, the next thing was also in the master bathroom. These puck lights right here. One day this one started coming on very slow, started flickering a little bit, and then it got to where every time you turned it on, it flickered for 30, 40, 50 seconds. Sometimes it would come on and go right back off, not even work at all. Eventually it got to the point where we have to figure out how to resolve this. We replaced that puck light right there, and as usual with everything in this camper, they come in pairs, because that one had to be replaced also. So now we've replaced those, and because you order them in packs of 6, I'm waiting for the next 4 somewhere in the camper that want to start flickering. The next thing that happened is not related to the camper, but camping parts. So you saw I got this new 3-stage water filter from Blu Technology. It's awesome. You guys should definitely give it a try, and if you won't, click the link below. You can save yourself 10%. Give them a try. It's changed our life as far as water filter parts go. We no longer have to carry a whole bunch of water parts like we used to have, the one that goes on the spigot, and we have our onboard one. Now we just use that and it takes care of everything for us. But getting this led to the next problem that we had. These blue water, well, these are black now. I used to run the blue ones, so I had one blue one for almost 2 years. Just ran from the spigot to the camper. When I had to get a second blue one, apparently they've changed the designs on the newer blue ones, because this old blue one right here is still working. The new ones, I went through 4 brand new ones and all of them leaked at the crimp, and y'all saw the video a while back, and apparently a lot of you guys are having the same problems. We've since switched to the black water hose for all of our water, and we just label them as our freshwater hoses. But the black ones have a much better connection than the new blue ones. But the new blue ones are nowhere close to as good as the old blue ones. So that is a list of all the things that we broke or had problems with, or things that need attention or repair in our first year out of camping or full-time living on the road. But I kind of want to talk to you about the things that we read and researched about that we thought would be a problem that we never had a problem with. The first one being these guys right here. These are the Westlake tires, and if you read anything online, everyone tells you horror stories about these things exploding, ripping parts of the camper off, destroying the sewer tubes, the jacks. Just not a good deal. But those are mostly about the E-rated tires. We have the G-rated tires, and we decided that after some research we were going to give these a try, because these tires are kind of expensive if you want to replace them. So we run a TPMS system, tire link, that hooks to our one control on the camper and talks to our phone when we're driving. We make sure that we're always at 110 psi, and we monitor them every time we travel. And so far, I'd be willing to bet that these have close to 20,000 miles on them and never had an issue out of them. And that's something that we were actually worried was going to be a big deal. The next thing that we thought would be a problem was our suspension, because we see all the horror stories about people having problems with their shackles, their wet bolts, their hangers. Just generally, there's always these horror stories about this part of the camper. So before we even started, we went ahead and installed the MORryde cross members, the MORryde heavy duty shackles, and the MORryde wet bolt kits. We retained the stock Lippert EcoFlex equalizers, and so far, after almost 20,000 miles, we've had no issues with the suspension. And I get under there and inspect it almost every move, just to make sure there's not something happening that I can't catch before it becomes a bigger deal. There were so many stories about these back doors leaking water into them and having damage where when you laid it down, either the hinges fell apart, the door fell apart, it was cracking, all around it wasn't a good deal. Well, we decided to coat our entire door with the bed liner stuff made by Raptor, and we take it down all the time and we've never seen water coming out of it. So we thought that was gonna be a big deal, and we watch it closely all the time, but so far that hasn't been a problem. The next thing that we were worried about that we haven't had a problem with was water leaks. Well, besides the one that we created with the washer and dryer, and the water was actually running out the pin box area right there, we made that one because we installed the washer and dryer. Well, actually the dealership didn't know how to tighten hoses. We have not had any water leaks in this camper, and I'm so thankful for that. It's actually such a big deal that every time I hook up to a new campground, I turn the water on slowly and I have a flow meter on. And I know that once my hot water tank gets full, I need to stop seeing water flow. If water's still flowing, it's going somewhere. And so far, that simple test to make sure everything is good has let me know that we don't have water going somewhere it shouldn't be going in this camper. It's something that you're super worried about when you first start RVing full time, but we're thankful we've never had to deal with that. All right, another thing is these hot water heaters. We always hear the stories about the hot water heater is an issue. Well, we've never had a problem with the electric side or the propane side. This is actually the best hot water heater we've ever owned. This is a 12-gallon hot water heater made by Suburban, and it's better than any house we've ever owned. Alicia is very particular about her showers and her hot water, and so far this camper right here has provided her with a better shower than any home we've ever owned. Another thing that we were told to worry about was these Norcold refrigerators not being cool enough to store your food. Well, besides the door alarm issues that we had in the beginning and the broken drawers down here, this thing works great. We actually have to turn it down because we're constantly freezing the top half of the refrigerator. So for us, this thing works great. The last thing that we were worried about having a problem with is our electrical system. Now, we've never had a problem in this breaker box or with our converter that's in the basement or our hardwired surge protector, which we added. And I think the hardwired surge protector is why we've never had a problem with anything electrical in our camper, because it prevents bad electricity from coming into this camper and damaging any of these components. Another reason why I'm glad we never had a problem with this is because I used to do this kind of stuff offshore, so I can figure this out. My problem is there's no schematics, and if there was a schematic, it was probably assembled by somebody in the RV plant that doesn't follow directions anyway, so having a drawing of where the wire is supposed to go and come from may not be beneficial, because it may not have been run the way that they were thought they were running for that day. So I'm glad there's not a problem, because I don't want to have to sort out where these wires may or may not run in this camper. I hope you enjoyed this video about all the things that we broke on our first 18 months of being full-time in this camper. Now, I know it seems like there's a lot of problems, but they kind of came in pairs. We went several months at times with no issues with this camper. But if you're gonna full-time RV, be prepared to work on things, because things will happen. No matter how good you take care of them, things will always break. Now, I'm gonna link everything in the description below of our problems and how we solved them, and on any video where we actually showed this problem happening, I'll link it down below as well. Hope you'll have a good day. See y'all next time.